Well, good evening, members, and welcome to this Resources and Governance Committee, Resource Committee, for Thursday, the 30th of September 2021. I'd like to welcome all here this evening, our members and our guests and everybody involved. It's nice to be back in the chamber again. So we've got quite a full programme on tonight, but so if we can crack on as much best we can, until we get home as soon as we can. I think you've probably all read about with Jim and the microphones. If you're not speaking, switch them off and obviously get less feedback on them. So we moved on to the main agenda then. Apologies and substitutes. Jason.
Thank you, Chair. I've received apologies from Councillor Michelle Morley. She is substituted by Councillor Lees, and Councillor Flitter sends his apologies, and he is substituted by Councillor Hughes.
I've tried paracetamol, and if it doesn't go soon, I'll drown it. Honestly, it's terrible. There you go. The next item number 3 is public participation. I've got 2 speakers on item 13, the Stockholm allotment. The first speaker is Miss Mary Derrick, and she's speaking and commenting on the compulsory purchase. Thank you, Mr. Derrick. You've got 3 minutes, and I'll tell you when you've got 30 seconds left. Thank you.
So I'm Mary Derrick from Stockholm's Allotment Association. This is in relation to item 13. Councillors, your vote tonight counts. Do you help or do you hinder the survival of Stockholm's allotments in their centenary year? Do you vote to benefit a whole community or to benefit one person? I will now refer to points raised in the officer's report. No money to support a compulsory purchase. We can help with that. Stockholm's allotments and the wider community have ambitious plans to raise the necessary funds to complete the CPO process. Lack of funds need not be your reason for voting against a CPO. We've calculated the budget to complete a CPO for Stockholm's allotments. Our estimate is £45,000. I will leave you copies of our estimated budget breakdown. There's no shortage of allotments across the district. We disagree. Derbyshire Dales and Matlock Town Council manage allotments. They all have waiting lists. Stockholm's allotments also has a waiting list. Derbyshire Dales waiting lists are capped at 10 people. The way waiting lists are managed doesn't show the true picture of unmet need within the Derbyshire Dales. Local allotments enhance the community. Stockholm's allotments are in the heart of Stockholm's village and have been there for over 100 years. Recently, we were recognised as an asset of community value. They are a focal point in the village, a place for folk of all ages to gather, share knowledge, get some exercise and enjoy each other's company whilst growing their own. Allotments help to combat loneliness, promote social inclusion and grow stronger, more resilient communities. Let's not undervalue what allotments and growing your own can do. Studies recommend allotment provision should be explicitly noted in National Public Health Strategy and the delivery of this locally. Existing social prescribers linked to GP surgeries are perfectly placed to prescribe access to allotments as an alternative to medicine to treat physical and mental health concerns. So here we have it. The Stockholm's allotment site has been saved from developers for 5 years by virtue of the asset of community value placed upon it. However, this doesn't change the fact that notice has been served to quit and clear the site, leaving the allotments gone by this time next year. Voting for compulsory purchase order to be placed on the land is the only way to save Stockholm's allotments. Once they are gone, they are gone. Tonight you vote for a whole community, or you vote for one person who sought an opportunity to buy a valuable resource, a community resource, with the intention to sell it on for financial gain. Are you okay with gone on your watch?
And you have 3 minutes. I'll tell you you've got 30 seconds left. Thank you.
Sharon Shirley, Stockholm's Allotment Association. I relate this statement to item number 13, Stockholm's Allotments. In relation to the officer believing there is not a shortage of allotments in the Derbyshire Dales, we would like to refer you to the Derbyshire Dales Open Space Assessment, November 2016. The report concludes current provision is below the nationally recommended amount. This is supported by the fact that all sites are operating at capacity and most have waiting lists, suggesting demand for allotments is not currently being met. The report identifies a shortfall in allotment space of 6 hectares, an area 7 times the size of Stockholm's allotments. Additionally, the report concludes that the Stockholm's allotments is of the highest quality in the Derbyshire Dales. Next, we would like to make reference to the suitability and viability of the development of this site. Information provided to us by a local mining expert suggests that due to the extensive lead mine shafts underneath the site would mean that this land is not suitable for development, but it is perfect for community growing. We would also like you to consider the past actions of the landlord of Stockholm's allotments in relation to the land already purchased by him near the White Lion pub in Stockholm's, which has since been left derelict. We believe that the landlord demolished Shindras house, which was a substantial house situated on this particular land, and that he subsequently sold the stone from it as building stone. This plot now has building permission for executive housing and has been on the market for some time. Finally, this land, as allotments in Stockholm's, we can go some way to providing sustainable ways of meeting increasing food demands. Promoting local food production can only be a good thing. Reducing energy and materials for processing, packaging and distributing of food and minimising food miles, thus playing our part in the bigger picture of reducing carbon dioxide release and global warming. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Sorry, I can't remember what item it is. Item 11, pavement licence, setting of fees, declaring interest due to the fact that I'm a licensee of public house. I don't know whether I have a vote or not on that.
Are you likely to take out a pavement licence?
Yeah, well, I've got one now.
You've got one there. I would say that gives you a prejudicial interest.
Right, thank you.
Any other interest? Councillor Cruz.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I've got an interest in item 12, the asset management plan, and Stockholm's allotments, because I'm on the town council. So just to make that clear, it's an interest, but I don't think it's a pecuniary interest.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hughes.
Likewise, I'm a member of Matlock Town Council, and therefore I have the same interests as Paul.
Okay.
Chair,
Councillor, sorry.
I've got an interest in item 11 as well. Same
Oh,
as,
pavement
Councillor
licence.
Ball.
Actually,
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Right. Item 5. There's no questions. Have you had any questions? No? Okay. Right. Moving on to item 6. Statement of accounts 2021 progress report. Now, on these 4 items here, 6, 7, 8 and 9, I would like, if it's possible, your permission to, when these items are presented by the officer, then if you've read them and we've had a week to read them, I think that personally it's necessary to have questions, it's necessary to have debate. I think personally we've had our time to study them. So what I would like to do, if with your permission, is to go straight to the vote. Is that possible? We agree with that? Okay. Thank you. Right, so move on to item 6 then, Statement of Accounts, 2021 Progress Report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this report was initially drafted as the Statement of Accounts 2021 report, which would have contained the recommendation to members that the audited Statement of Accounts be approved. Due to circumstances outside the Council's control, it's not been possible to complete all audit testing by the deadline of the 30th of September, and accordingly this report updates members to the current situation. In summary, the current situation is that audit work is ongoing, and it's expected that all audit work will be completed to allow for the approval of the audited Statement of Accounts by members by the 31st of December 21 at the very latest. An update has been made to the Council's website to ensure that this situation is transparent, and this ensures that the Council has fulfilled its legal duties as at the 30th of September. The website includes a letter regarding the delay from our auditors, Mazars LLP, and this letter was emailed to all members separately yesterday. The website also contains the Council's notification of delay in publishing audited Statement of Accounts. Members are reminded that last year the government legislated to allow councils until the 30th of November to publish their audited Statement of Accounts. Whilst it's not known exactly how many local authorities have published audited accounts for 2021 by today, there was a report to the House of Commons Committee of Public Accounts on Local Auditor Reporting in Local Government in England, which was published on the 14th of July this year. That clarified that only 45% of local authorities published audited accounts on time for 2019-20, which was last year, and only 57% of local authorities published them in time for the previous year, 2018-19. The recommendation of this report presented to members is simply for members to note the current position. Thank you.
I'm happy to move that, Chair.
Yeah, I'm happy to second that. It is a case to note.
I'd just like to add, Chair, if I may, that the staff have been through a very difficult time, as many authorities and organisations have, so we do recognise the difficult circumstances and accept the delay in it. Thank you.
Stage to thank the staff for the fantastic reports that we see in front of us, because they've been so busy. I know Jenny and Karen and all have been doing other things as well as their own offices, so thank you very much on our behalf. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So it is actually only a year since the committee last reviewed this charter, but the Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accounting does recommend that we bring it on an annual basis. So the public sector internal audit standards require that we set out the purpose, authority and responsibility of internal audit in a charter, which is what we've got before you. There haven't been any changes to the public sector audit standards in the last year. So I've reviewed the charter and I think that it's still fit for purpose. There's a couple of places where I've changed the phrases from internal control and control environment to current best practice phraseology, which is risk management, governance and internal control processes. So it's recommended that members note and agree the outcome of the review, and I'll bring it back in another year's time. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. Thank you for that report. I know you've been working very, very hard on it, so many thanks for that. Do I find a mover?
I'll move that, Chair. Sorry.
But I wanted just to make a comment.
Yeah, make a comment.
Your department, Jenny, is clearly under some pressure. I think it's pretty clear from what I've been reading, and I understand that you will
still unable to recruit a senior auditor. Is that correct? But you have taken on some additional help, I believe.
Yes, unfortunately, we advertised it twice and didn't manage to fill it. So then we've advertised for an auditor post.
What that down to? Is there a particular reason out there as to why?
There is just a big shortage, I think, of lots of professional staff in planning, environmental health, audit. We've tried to recruit for other places in the consortium, audit consortium as well, and we haven't had the applicants.
Anyway, thank you very much.
Sorry, but we have recruited, you're right, an auditor now. So we will be training them up in due course.
Thank you for Mark. Gary Hughes.
Chair, I'd be happy to second that. I would be happy to second.
Thank you very much.
It is me again, thank you, Chair. So this is to update you on the results of our external review, which happened in May 21. It was actually undertaken remotely due to COVID. It is actually a requirement that we have an external review at least every 5 years, and that's to provide members and officers with assurance that internal audit is fit for purpose, doing what they're supposed to do. The review is also useful to identify further areas of improvement for us. So the last review was July 2016, so it was due again. We had the review undertaken by Robin Pritchard from Business Risk Solutions, and just to give you some assurance, he does have a wealth of experience in internal audit. He has undertaken many external reviews, so he knows what he's talking about. So his review does conclude that the Internal Audit Consortium and Derbyshire Dales District Council are delivering an audit service that generally conforms with the public sector internal audit standards, and there's no areas where we don't conform. So you have got a copy of the full report at Appendix 1. If you look at the benchmarking, it is pleasing to note that we do compare favourably with other teams, our peers and other sectors. And the reviewer has made a number of recommendations. So I've developed an action plan to address those recommendations, and we'll be working on that over the next year. And I will bring back a progress report on that to this committee in the future. So the recommendation is the results of the review be noted. Thank you. It is. Thank you. So yes, this completes, tells you about the audits we've completed for the 21-22 plan to date. We have only issued 2 reports so far, but both with substantial assurance. So I don't have any concerns to raise on those particular areas. We didn't identify any fraud. As we just discussed, we didn't manage to recruit a senior auditor, but we have recruited an auditor, so I'm hoping that now we will progress on the plan quicker. The current senior auditor has been working on business grants still, however that has reduced a lot, and she is now mainly on internal audit work and the work plan. I will be meeting with the Director of Resources in the next couple of weeks to discuss the audit plan and to prioritise what we think are the most important areas to focus on in the remaining of the year. And I'll bring a report in November to this committee with a revised plan for you to approve. So again, it's that the recommendation be noted.
Thank you. The final proposer for that recommendation. Councillor Ball. You made, Mike, yeah?
Yes, thank you.
Second the first, Mike.
I'll second it, yes.
Thank you
yes,
very much.
Yeah, I mean, it's very good work, very good work. Can you just tell me, just in a brief summary form, what these two recommendations were that are reported at paragraph 2.7? And can I, Chair, just make one comment, and I don't mean it adversely or critically.
I'm sure you don't.
But we get these reports and they come to me with traffic light type things, and I get them in black and white. I haven't got a clue sometimes what, just a note, and I mean this somewhat seriously, to the committee, when we get something like this, could they please just give me a colour copy, as it were?
I'm sure they can accommodate you in that one.
Yeah, okay, that's fine.
Was it the creditors report you meant, where there's two recommendations?
It's on page...
Oh.
Paragraph 2.7, two reports have been issued with a conclusion of substantial assurance that two recommendations have been made. I was just wondering very quickly what they were.
Oh, yes, if you look at Appendix 1, it was in relation to creditors where we've made the recommendations. It's still got substantial assurance because we don't feel there's a great deal of risk with those recommendations. I think from recollection they were to do with, in some cases, official orders hadn't been raised before the work had been placed, but there are some circumstances where that isn't strictly necessary. So the recommendation was for financial regulations to be reviewed to clarify for staff when official orders do need to be raised, and then also for there to be a process to ensure that where they should have been raised, they are being raised, and it's been picked up if they're not being.
Chair, may I make a comment?
You may indeed.
Councillor Ratcliffe raises a very good point, but it's not just pertinent to the audit report, it's pertinent to any other piece of paper where there's red outline on a map. I asked for traffic light systems some years ago to be brought in here based on my experience up the road. So I'd just like officers to note, please, that when we do read these and it says the area is marked in red, when you read it in black and white, it is extremely difficult. Thank you.
Councillor Allison, your comment?
Thank you, Chair. Just to follow up on the explanation for the recommendation for raising purchase orders, how does that work with your budgeting commitments if you don't have a full overview of what expenditure is going through the organisation?
Well, it would be up to budget holders to make sure that they were aware of that, and we're ensuring that orders are raised appropriately. And some of them might be contracts, I guess, so they'd be monitored a different way. So they wouldn't need an order raised for a contract.
Thank you. Thank you. You can't.
Thank you, Chair. As Chair of the Climate Change Working Group, I can't really approve of the problem with the colouring because everyone's provided with an iPad. It's quite possible to get all these minutes on the iPad. Looking around this room at the amount of paper that's been printed and the huge volume of it, we should be using the technology available. We should be using iPads. It's in glorious Technicolor on my iPad. So, you know, I've listened to people saying, oh, I like a paper copy and I can't use an iPad. But I think we have to face facts, members. I think we certainly have to. We have to try and use electronic equipment we have and save the amount of paper, the amount of wood and trees that are being used up for this purpose.
Chair, if I may just respond as the member that mentioned this. I agree entirely with you, David. The only point in this particular instance was that I went to the agenda item on latest committee papers and read it on my laptop, and it's still in black and white. It was still in black and white. So the point I'm making, I don't mind whatever format it comes to me in, provided it's coloured coded.
At this stage, I would like to bring Lee in.
Well,
Councillors, to move this matter on, if you don't object, I'll raise this with the corporate director tomorrow and we'll look into the matter.
Chair, I'd like to come in if I may. We did move to paperless activity some years ago, and we've only returned to paper because we've been working from a home situation. So I personally think Councillor Chapman has got a very valid point. Now that we're starting to get back to meeting in person, we should dump the paperwork and go back to our iPad.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. No.
Apologies, members. We're getting feedback from the speaker behind Karen, so.
Thank you, Chair. Oh, that's better. So I've not got a great deal to add to this report about write-offs. The write-offs are a lot lower than usual. The recommendation of the report is asking members to approve the write-off of just 2 write-offs over £10,000 each, totalling £31,000 and 26. And that's the lowest that I can ever remember bringing to members. It was kind of counterintuitive because you'd think that at the moment, with all the pandemic and the problems businesses are having, that write-offs would be higher. But I suspect there's a bit of a lag. Businesses have had furlough to help them. They've had all the government grants, the grants that the council's given out. And also we suspended debt recovery, if you remember. As the report indicates, we've now resumed debt recovery. We had our first courts earlier this week and obtained liability orders. And I think as the grants and the support to businesses is withdrawn, and as we pursue debt recovery more vigorously, I think we will unfortunately see an increase in write-offs when I come to you in March. But for the time being, it is a low figure. Just to give you a little bit more information about the write-offs in Appendix 1, I can't tell you the names of the companies because of data protection. The amounts both relate to business rates. The first write-off for £20,000 and odd pounds, where it says a limited company was resolved, that was actually a public house. I think we all know that they've had difficulties, and the charge goes back to 2017-18. We have tried since then to collect, but that company is now dissolved. The second write-off for just under £11,000, that relates to a cafe and retail premises. We had referred that to the enforcement agents, but the owners of the business have now disappeared without trace. So I'm asking for approval to write off those 2. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just one comment really. It's the write-offs that you're bringing to the committee that are low. The total write-offs are still £199,131 for the period to September. So there is a lot of write-off under delegated authority. How does that compare with previous years?
if you look at the table, table 1 on page 52 of the agenda, of the £199,000 that you quoted, £78,000 was actually written off by the committee in July, and it referred to long-standing backdating cases that were exceptional. They're not the norm. The amounts that I've authorised is £90,000, which I haven't actually looked at that, but my recollection is that that is lower than usual.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll move into debate. Councillor Slack. Oh, sorry. Sorry, Gary.
Yes, Karen, I've never seen it so low before, but absolutely, it's going to be a lag. Do we know when you think that lag will surface?
No, but I would expect that when I come back in March, there will be more, because we have just had the first court in Chesterfield. Next week, we've got one in Derby. So I think as a result of those, and as I say, as a result of the government and local authority support to businesses being withdrawn, businesses might start to suffer and go into liquidation. So I think we will see a difference when I come back in March.
I'm sure so. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Slack. I beg your pardon. Sorry. I'll think of Derby County, you're right. Sorry, Mike.
Anyway, thank you, Chair. I'd like to make a few comments, but I'm very willing to second the report. The first comment I would make is that you look at the figures, and we do this every time, and you think, my word, £90,000, what could we do with that? And yet we're writing it off. Or indeed the 132,000 total. But you have to see it in context, as Karen frequently points out. It's only about 0.2% of the total that we bring in through our council tax levy. So I think we have to look at it in perspective, but nevertheless, I think it's pretty an unavoidable conclusion that significant amounts each year are no doubt, certainly for a public perception, are being written off because for quite a valid reason. So I'd make that comment. The other comment is Karen's point in her comments on paragraph 2.2. When the impact of the full resumption of debt recovery actions is felt later in this financial year, there is likely to be an increase in requests for write-off. And I think there are numerous reasons. We all know the circumstances here: rising fuel bills, universal credit tax reduction, inflation, all sorts of things. We have certain welfare measures in place. We have an operating, very successful hardship fund, and we've administered the discretionary fund, I think, wonderfully, and it's to our credit that we did revise it. Someone made the comment, and I don't think exaggeratedly, that the change in that discretionary fund quite possibly saved lives during this COVID period. So, as I say, there's lots here to observe and to note, but all in all, it's one of those reports that, we accept, and not for the moment would I go against the recommendation.
Thank you, Mike. Karen, you want to take back on this comment?
Yes, Councillor Radcliffe is right.
Oh, well, there is one question, Karen. At some point later in the year, I wouldn't mind seeing just a bit of an update on the hardship fund, what we've used, maybe a few examples of circumstances, and do we need to top it up? We always said that we might.
Yeah, certainly I can bring that back. I mean, we do have a range of measures that we use to help residents. There's quite a lot of different council tax reliefs and discretionary discounts, and applications for those has gone up. I've got more than in previous years to consider. So yeah, there is a range of measures to help residents in particular, and some to help businesses.
Yeah.
In answer to Councillor Ratcliffe, and certainly would need looking at, I think I would have added a word in that last sentence there, Karen. I would expect a significant increase with all that's happening. So we certainly would look at it.
Chair, this might be slightly off the point, but I think it's probably worth asking. The government is bringing in a new scheme to £500 million, I think, to help low-income families that may be out of severely disadvantaged by the changes in universal credit. Is this something that our council will be administering locally? Thank you.
Is Councillor Hughes, is that the announcement they made this morning? We haven't had any correspondence today, but I suspect that might go to county councils.
Any more comments on debate? No? Go straight to the vote then. All those in favour? It's unanimous. Thank you very much. Item 11, payment licensing setting out of fees. Councillor Lees, Councillor Bull. You need to withdraw, yeah. Thank you. This is one you're saying, Tim?
It is. Thank you, Chair. Very little to add to this report. As it says, this is really a referral from the Licensing and Appeals Committee. It talks about the extension of pavement licensing system that was introduced to help businesses recover, the hospitality industry recover from COVID. That's been extended until September next year, so an additional 12 months. In considering the delegations for dealing with that, the Licensing and Appeals Committee suggested that we introduce a fee. When we considered that, when Council considered that just over a year ago, we decided to waive the fee, although a maximum fee of £100 could be charged, and we did that for good reasons, to support business and recovery. However, the Licensing and Appeals Committee felt that now the time was right to introduce a fee so that didn't continue to be subsidised by the local taxpayer. They asked us how much we thought would cover officers' costs, and we suggested a fee of £80, somewhat less than the maximum. And that's really what's before you today, to decide whether you wish to adopt that fee or not.
Thank you, Tim. Questions for Tim? No? And most rated debate? Sorry, Paul.
Thanks, Chair. Just wondering if you had any feedback from licensees relative to that proposal. Has there been any input or?
We haven't had any direct feedback from licensees on that proposal, no. We are now the only council in Derbyshire that doesn't charge a fee. There were two originally, but now the only one. And I think the fact we were offering it free of charge was very welcomed at the time. We issued quite a lot of pavement licenses and dealt with a lot more enquiries. And I think business was genuinely grateful for that gesture.
Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Chair. I was wondering how many licenses we have actually had.
In the region of 40, I think, Councillor Hughes, that sort of order.
40?
40-ish, yes.
40. So we're talking about £3,200.
Yes, that sort of order.
Any more questions? I'm straight to debate then. Councillor Hughes?
I move that we remain free. £3,200 doesn't seem to be a lot of money to this council, given the write-offs of £132,000, whereas £80 may be a lot to a small cafe setting up on a pavement and suffering the consequences of COVID for the last 18 months. So I think for another year we should keep it as, my motion is that we should maintain the present free licensing.
That's the motion on the table, so that's debated. So you put that through then or someone amend it. I think we go through debate motion.
So we move on to proposal to accept the motion. Is that right?
Sorry, Chair. You have this motion on the table now, so that's now to be debated and voted on.
Okay, yeah.
Without wishing to sound parsimonious, I can't agree, Councillor Hughes. I think that, you know, we've been very generous, and I think that the state of our finances is not desperate, but I think we're setting a precedent if we do go free here. I think if it's moved and won, I think there should be a limit. Would it be renewed in 12 months' time, reviewed? Tim?
The government has suggested that this system won't be extended past September next year. They're proposing that the planning.
Sorry, mine.
They're proposing that the planning relaxations that have been introduced may very well be extended, but not the pavement licensing. So we don't know. I have to say that this was a proposal that came from an elected member. So, so from an officer point of view, I've no problem anyway.
Chair, I've given my view. I'm not going to lose sleep about it. As Councillor Hughes points out, it's not a vast amount, and if it's seen as a gesture of goodwill, then I'm happy to go along with it.
Councillor Cruz.
Thank you, Chair. The pavement licences might not get much usage over the next few months, but yeah, the council licence, the pavement licences may not get much use over the next few months, but as we enter spring, summer next year, they will get some good use, and I think they've been a good innovation. So by making them free for now, I think it's a good thing, and it's not a big deal of money, and I think it's a good kind of positive message for the overall council. So that'll be my view.
Councillor Gretry.
Yes, I'd also like to reiterate that, and I think that it's an excellent idea that we do waiver this, and it gives the High Street another opportunity to get back on its feet.
Councillor, were you prepared to move?
I think I did, yeah.
Okay, then, all those in favour? Unanimous. I beg your pardon. Abstention. Okay. Okay, thank you very much. Can we get Councillor Lees and Councillor Bull back in, please? Okay, moving on to asset number 12, asset management plan, landholding and review phase 2 and 1. Mike. Oh.
Thank you, Chair. It's a fairly self-explanatory report recommending 2 community asset transfers, one by way of lease to the trustees of the existing village hall, and the second one being the freehold of the remainder of the site, the larger site, to Matlock Town Council, both for community uses, both at a nominal value, with each party bearing their own legal costs. Nothing further to add, but happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Questions for? Any questions? No. I'll move into debate then. Councillor Purdy.
Chair, I'm entirely happy with the officer's report. I think it's a good thing to do, and I'll speak about this item on the next debate, if I may. So I'd like to move the recommendations.
All those in favour? That's unanimous, yeah.
Councillor Greatorex, did you vote on that? Sorry, I couldn't see. Sorry, you were blocked.
You,
I couldn't see you.
Okay, moving on to item 13, Stockholm's allotment.
Thank you, Chair. That's me again. Well, you heard earlier from two members of the public who spoke very eloquently about this item. I should say that I'm actually the officer who did the listing for the Asset to Community Value nomination. I did visit the site, and I can entirely reiterate what they said about the allotments. They're lovely and really are a great enhancement to the community and a credit to those who keep them. Really very nice to visit. It's clearly an emotive issue and understand very well the feelings of the allotment holders and the allotment association, so it's probably worth explaining a little bit about how the recommendation has come to be. And in doing that, I'll just take a few minutes, if I may, to talk through the processes of the Asset to Community Value nomination and how that relates to the compulsory purchase order suggestion. Assets of community value, the situation is that the council was originally approached by the Allotment Association with a view to supporting them with a nomination to list the site as an asset of community value. At that time, as I understand it, they were threatened with that they would be served with a notice to leave the site. And they felt that a listing as an asset of community value would be of benefit to them in fighting that action. In talking to the Allotment Association, I explained what the purpose of the asset to community value regime was, which is not as great as it might be, if I'm honest. The ACV process ran its course, so the asset to community value, falling into the jargon, the asset of community value process ran its course, and during that process being underway, the notice to quit the site was served, as I understand it. So at that time, the Allotment Association also wrote and asked that we consider compulsory purchase of the site. That's a facility that exists within the Small Holding and Allotments Act and gives local authorities, or gives allotment authorities, which are the district council and potentially a town or parish council, the right to initiate compulsory purchase action for allotments. In terms of the asset to community value, what that's actually about is about giving a community group, or the community if you like, the ability to buy sites. It was originally introduced with the idea of allowing the community to take on sites when they were offered for sale. And the way that works is that if a site is listed, it means that the community has the right to express an interest in buying the site if it's put up for sale or a disposal is intended by the owner. It then puts a stay on that sale until the community has had a chance to raise the money to make a bid for the site. It doesn't require the owner to sell it to that community group, and it doesn't stop the owner from closing a site or from putting in a planning application to change the use of that site. It doesn't do any of those things. It's all about buying the site. It does, to give you a full picture, it does remove certain permitted development rights in terms of certain sites, and it can be considered as a material issue in planning considerations. Okay, but it doesn't stop a planning application being made or planning permission being given for an alternative use. It's just a factor, along with many other factors, that will be considered in the planning application. Anyway, after the process, we went through the whole process, and without boring you with extreme detail, one of the key issues is to consider whether there's a likely future use of the site. In my considerations, I looked at effectively the case law that exists at tribunal level and felt that there was enough of a future use, there's at least 12 months further use, to justify the issuing of a listing as an asset of community value. That is an issue that the owner has indicated he wants to challenge through his representatives, although that challenge has not yet been made. The way that that works is there's firstly an internal review of my decision, and then if the owner is not happy with the results of that review, that can go to the first tier tribunal. So there's a process to go through in respect of that. It's not necessarily finished yet. As I say, during the asset of community value process, the Allotment Association was served with a notice to quit by the landowner. They subsequently wrote to the District Council via me, asking us to consider exercising our powers for the compulsory purchase of the site. The legal powers relating to the compulsory purchase requirements are summarised in the report, and hopefully there's enough detail in there for members to understand what those are. And it's quite clear we do have the ability to start compulsory purchase proceedings, although we don't have to, we have the powers to do it. It's clear that the request must be considered, and since none of the relevant powers have been delegated to officers, it not being an issue that's come up very often at this council, they must be considered by this committee. This is the correct forum in which to make that consideration. It should be noted that the powers are available equally to us as a district council, and they're also available to what's termed in the Act parish councils. For the purpose of that it would include the town council. The town council is a parish council in law in that respect. In terms of allotment provision, currently the District Council operates 2 allotment sites. We operate 2, one in Matlock and one in Bakewell. The provision of further allotments has not been identified as a priority in the corporate plan or within the asset management plan. And equally, the Council has not received any approach from community groups asking for the development of more allotments. What we've had is 2 almost crisis situations where allotment associations have been threatened with losing their sites. This is one of them. The other you might remember from March last year was Brailsford allotments, when this committee considered a similar issue. There was a subtle difference there, taking you back because memories are not always very clear. There was a subtle difference that Brailsford Allotment Association had been offered an alternative site by the landowner. That's not the case in this situation. So we're aware of localised issues in relation to the provision and loss of 2 allotment sites. And it would be very clear, wouldn't it, that if the allotment holders at Stockholm were without their allotments, there would be a shortage of allotment sites in this area. That's quite clear. So this report is really about the request to start compulsory purchase action against the landowner to safeguard the site for the Allotment Association. There are powers to do that. The issues for the council, though, are the lack of any policy direction in respect of this in the past and at the present, and the level of risk involved in compulsory purchase. And that risk is mainly financial. You know when we submit these reports that there's always a legal risk and a financial risk associated with the report. And I'm never sure how much people read them, but you'll know that this report, that risk is assessed as high. The reason for that is because there's finance involved and we haven't got any finance allocated to this particular purpose. The level of that finance is what makes the risk potentially high. The Allotment Association have indicated that they would be happy to try and pay back any costs to the council in undertaking a compulsory purchase. And I have no doubt that they're completely sincere in that promise. The issue is about how much that would cost, and there is a risk involved with this. None of this is certain. It's all about risk, and it's about the value of land. Some of you may be aware that the Valuation Office issue reports giving indicative levels for land value in certain areas. And those are used largely for planning policy purposes in helping us to make planning decisions and know what sites are viable and what are not. In looking at this area, the value of agricultural land is roughly £21,000 per hectare, and the value of residential land is 2.1 million per hectare. If we were looking at the site as is, we would assume that it's agricultural land. They're allotments. They're used for agricultural purposes. And in any compulsory purchase action, it would be reasonable to assume that the council's starting point would be to make the case that it was agricultural land. Equally, without knowing the landowner's full intent for the site, and we can speculate, can't we, but we don't know, it would be reasonable to assume that a landowner would try and make the most money available from that site and might want to claim that the site potentially had residential use. And as some members know, because I've been asked questions, there is a hope value that can be assigned to sites in compulsory purchase proceedings. So the landowner might very well say, oh, well, I have a sincere hope and a genuine hope and a realistic hope that this site could be used for residential purposes, in which case the value of the land would be that much greater. The site's 0.8 of a hectare roughly in area. So you can work out 0.8 times 2.1 million if you want to. It comes to just under 1.7 million. That's a potential risk to the council. It is a risk, not a reality. It's a risk. We don't know how likely that risk is to be realised, but nevertheless, if we were to commit to compulsory purchase proceedings, there is a potential that risk could be realised. And we haven't got the finance available for that. That's why the recommendation in the report is to decline the compulsory purchase order. I'm happy that that's a lot of information to take in, but I'm happy to take any questions. Bearing in mind that I'm not a compulsory purchase expert, I will do my best to answer.
Questions for Tim? Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Tim, for that very clear and concise explanation of the process. If the landowner or anybody else put in an outline planning permission or an application for change in use, and that established whether it was available for housing or not available for housing, what would be the implication for risk? That's my first question. The second question is there the possibility of putting in a search for sites for allotments into the revised local plan, or in the process to revise the local plan? The third question is, are there sites that could be available for allotments that we know of? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. If I could answer questions 2 and 3 first, because they're far easier. In terms of a search for sites, I had a chat with Mike Hayes, the policy manager, earlier today about this very issue. We have got a search for sites, which did close in July, but nevertheless, it doesn't really ever close. We just publicise it more during that time. Mike would be happy to put out another call, which was explicit about allotments, for example. That would involve some very slight changes and some paperwork, and he feels that could be done. So I don't think there's any problem with that. As I mentioned at the beginning of my almost speech, I don't normally do that. You know, every understanding why the Allotment Association would want allotments to exist. You know, they really are very, very lovely. Are there sites available that we know of? I don't think there are. Again, in speaking to Mike, there's nothing that's come forward in the call for sites so far that would be really suitable or has been put forward for that purpose. As you might imagine, the call for site tends to encourage people to put forward sites with large values, and an allotment site doesn't necessarily have that in terms of, you know, the rental income you might get from it and so on and so forth. Nevertheless, if we were to put out a call for sites and it helped in any way, that would be great, wouldn't it? In terms of the planning application, this is something I've been asked a couple of times. It's difficult to give a definitive answer because I don't think anyone in the room knows enough about, I was looking at Lee then, sorry, but anyone in the room knows enough about compulsory purchase proceedings to know exactly how that would work. Taking a logical approach to it, you can see that if somebody put in a planning application to develop the site for residential use and that was granted, you can see how that would be a very strong positive in favour of the higher value of the land. Equally, if someone put in a planning application for residential use and it was refused, you could see that that would indicate towards the lower level. How that would play out in the compulsory purchase proceedings, I couldn't say. You might suggest that the risk was reduced in those circumstances.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you, Chair. The council obviously does own land. You know, Councillor Hall, we've looked for sites of a certain area for other purposes for quite some time. Clearly, the park is greater than 0.8 of a hectare. We've never considered that for that purpose, but we can have those conversations.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ratcliffe.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Can I say that I have a divided response to this report, and having read all the letters that came our way and listened to the two eloquent speakers earlier on, I'm even more divided, as it were. My sympathies go out to the residents of Stockholm and certainly the Allotment Society. I was a member of the Worksworth Town Council for 15 years, and probably for a good bulk of that time, I was searching on behalf of our residents to try and find allotments that had been taken away for building many years ago. There is an allotment association and an active allotments up at Middleton, but you know it's not. The important point is where that land is and where those allotments are to best serve the residents. Now, two things strike me, Tim, if I may ask you these questions, because when I say I've got divided responses, I agree with your recommendation and I'll vote for it. But I'd like to think we've done everything possible to help these residents, and I'd like to explore a couple of those with you in the form of questions, if I may. First of all, this land is now listed as an asset of community value, correct? Doesn't that, I'm going on a little bit of experience here, afford them a 6-month moratorium over the sale of it to be able to negotiate, to raise the funds and negotiate the purchase of it?
There's a simple answer to that, Councillor Ratcliffe. Yes, it does.
Yes, it does. Right. The second question is the total of 42,900 was put forward to us, which I think was the compulsory purchase price, as it were. Do you happen to know what the market sale valuation might be on this if there was a sale attempted outside of compulsory purchase? I mean, it might be commercially sensitive, as it were, but I mean, is it more than that, greatly more than that, or about the same?
Well, we haven't had the site formally valued, so this is my simple maths based on the Valuation Office report. If the site was listed, if the site was considered to be agricultural land, it comes out around about £17,000 to £18,000. If it's considered to be residential land, it comes out at 1.68 million. But considerably more. But that's my simple maths rather than the formal valuation.
You see, what I have in mind is that if Matlock, I'm going back to my experience with Worksworth and their town council. If Matlock Town Council could be persuaded, or indeed Stockholm, they have a parish council, the two, in collaboration with ourselves over some form of fundraising, could not that point about a negotiated sale purchase with the landowner be taken forward?
It's my understanding, and I'm looking at Lee a little bit here, that in going forward with the compulsory purchase, you are required to negotiate first, aren't you? So we would have to go through that process anyway. Without going into all the details, and this is second-hand information, I understand that the Allotment Association has tried to negotiate with the landowner and be told that he won't sell it to them. That's my understanding. We haven't had any of that process at this stage ourselves.
Yes, I mean, you see, the residents, I would have thought anyway, could use allotment law or whatever it's called, town and whatever legality to try and urge the town council to try to actively more pursue the establishment of allotments, which might lead to the purchase. I think what I'm trying to do here, in a very long-winded way, is to say going to the compulsory purchase should not be seen by the residents as the door being slammed in their face. Can I make that point? I think there are strong reasons why we can't do that, but my word, I hope they'll take away from what we're now talking about, of empathy, sympathy with them, and an attempt to try and help them wherever we possibly can.
That, but I'm trying to help Councillor Ratcliffe in this debate because when I speak, you'll hear, I hope, words that will help you. I'll wait till the others come first.
Councillor Allison.
Thank you, Chair. My first question to Tim is really about the demand for allotments in the district. I mean, I was looking on the council website and there seems to be waiting lists for every allotment site that we have in the district. And I just wondered, and I think it comes back to something that you said before about having some sort of policy around this as a council about how many allotments we would like to see in the district. Is there any sort of underlying data that we can use or guidance that says, as a district, as a number of residents, this is the amount of allotments we should be providing? That's my first question.
Thank you, Chair. One at a time is great, if that's okay, Councillor Allison. This hasn't been a priority area for the council. We own 2 allotment sites. The district council only owns 2 allotment sites across the district. The others are either provided by parish or town councils or by private sites. And that's to the credit of all those organisations involved. In terms of numbers, one of the speakers spoke about the open spaces requirement. There's also a requirement in our local plan that talks about 0.17 hectare of allotment land per 1,000 population. So that's a kind of starting point, but this is not an area of work that's been looked at in any great detail in the council up to now. There haven't been people knocking at the door asking us to do that. Clearly, we're now in a situation where in a specific case, a group of individuals are asking us to do that, and that's right and proper because they're at risk of losing their valued facility. And I should have said at the beginning, the purpose of the asset of community value regime is to identify sites that are provide social interest or social well-being. So clearly, a very important thing. And one of the speakers at least referred to those kind of issues in their speech. These do provide a huge community benefit.
Okay, thank you, Tim. I think that's it for me. It's the fact that really, when these situations arise, the only place that residents can come to for any help is the district council, because those powers sit within the district council. So it seems to me that we do need some kind of policy on it, that we do need to start to consider that, especially as part of our climate change agenda as well. The second question is to do with, is there a possibility we can actually defer this decision so that we can get some proper figures on the valuation of the land and the intentions of the landowner?
I don't think we've...
Councillor Raw has asked to speak.
Councillor Rowe?
Yeah, I think Tim's done a great job, but I don't think we've got enough information for us to make such a huge decision, which is going to have an incredible impact on lots of local people's lives that have invested blood, sweat and tears into these allotments. We need to be able to make this decision based on, clear information about the value of the property and the intentions of the landowners, what alternatives we can have. And yes, we do need, as part of our green agenda and part of our climate change initiatives, to look at how we increase, not decrease, the number of allotments we have available in the district. And I think we need to ensure we have that in the council plan going forward. But I don't think we have enough information in front of us. Tim's done the best he can with the information available to make such a huge decision on something that, affects people's lives in the Derbyshire Dales.
Councillor Cruz.
Thank you very much, Chair. So this is in my patch, as it were. So I do feel very passionate about it. It's not just an asset of community value; it's a wonderful asset of community value. So well done to the allotment holders, the residents. The mobilisation from the community is really quite impressive through social media and other means, and congratulations on 100 years of being established as well. So, and also great speeches from the public participation. So thanks very much for that. And I'll do anything I can to help and support the mobilisation. My question, Tim, is why can't we trigger the compulsory purchase order now, and the clock starts ticking, and if it's 20 odd grand, I'm sure we could find 20 grand between the community, various public bodies. If it suddenly flips over to being 1.7 million, clearly the equation changes. So why can't we trigger the compulsory purchase and make the decision change, so we wouldn't be able to go forward with the compulsory purchase, obviously if the value kicked in at 1.7 million, if it flipped. So it went from agricultural land to being effectively residential. And that means we're moving forward. It's a positive decision. It's only 20k. We could cap it off at a certain limit. And as a district council, we'd be taking proactive action. Links to the climate change, links to all the other good things, well-being. And I think it would be quite a bold move, but it would be a very positive move from this district council. So I'd be keen to get some feedback.
Councillor Hughes.
Can I have the answer to the question?
Can we have Tim's answer to that question, please?
My answer would be I'm going to have to look at Lee for that as to whether that would be possible.
Okay, any more questions?
Right. Okay. Now I've had Tim's answer now. I think I would like to suggest that we hear back from Tim on Paul's question, and that would rely on us deferring the decision. But the other issue is that if that's not the case, we might want to wait until a planning application was put in, and that might determine the current value of the land, and that might then determine whether or not would reduce the risk and perhaps give us more confidence on the value of the land. So my suggestion is, I'd like to hear what other councillors think of this suggestion. My suggestion is that we defer until a planning application is put in place if it is not possible to pursue Councillor Cruz's suggestion. And in addition to that, that we request as a committee that the local plan, there's a call for sites for allotments is put out by the local plan for the local plan, so that we can increase potentially the number of sites that the district council provides or other people provide for allotments in the district council area.
I'm going to bring Councillor Chapman and then I'm going to Lee in to sum it up. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. The flaw in your suggestion, David, is the fact that nobody can force anybody to bring a planning application forward. So the owner could hang on for 12 months, enforce the eviction, and then decide what he was going to do then. So that's really the problem there. So I wouldn't look at that as a reason for deferment, because we could be deferring for years and years and years. As Mike, I have a conflicting sort of interest with not an interest, an approach to this, because I mean the allotments are a British way of life. They're a charming, necessary, long-standing means of entertainment, of production of their own vegetables, etc., etc. And it would be a real shame. And I think, going on the point of allocating land, I think one of the important things about an allotment is that it is local to the people who use it. I mean, you don't want to drive 4 miles to a piece of land in Bakewell to grow your vegetables. It should be within walking distance. So I think just looking at land to allocate as a replacement for the Stockholm allotment holders, really, I think that would be nearly as bad as not having any allotments at all, because it's a community centre, it's the community asset, and we should be looking at ideally looking at keeping these allotments, however that strategy may have to pan out.
Thank you, Dave. I'd like now to bring Lee in. So, what's it?
Thank you through you, Chair. Councillors, it just so happens that due to an approach by a parish council on another piece of land, the legal team's been looking at compulsory purchase and various and hoops. It is quite a complicated process. So I'm not saying anything to put you off here. I'm just trying to give you the facts here. So firstly, you do have to show that you've tried to enter into genuine discussions to purchase the land before you can even start compulsory purchase. You also must show that this is really the only option. This piece of land is the only option you have to buy to fulfil what you're trying to achieve. I think the biggest issue we have here, and I do take all the points that have been taken on, is that, and I think Councillor Hughes picked up on the point, until the owner of this land actually values the land at a value that we can afford and not a 1.7 million, which is clearly what he intends. And as I say, that's an estimated type value, but if that's clearly what he's got in his head, then no negotiations are going to get anywhere, and taking this matter forward could potentially put the council at risk of having to buy at that value. There is the issue that if we are looking to purchase it and we value it lower, then this could be legally challenged. We could end up with quite an extensive period of time that we would have to go through. And estimates say that if you end up with a contested compulsory purchase order, you could be looking to 2 or 3 years to finally actually get to compulsory purchase. So that's sort of the background to this. I take everything on that's being said, but that's sort of the facts and the legal process. And there are quite a number of other hoops we would have to jump through to go that way. Did that answer the question, Councillor Cruz? Or
I think you did a good job trying to answer the question. You did a good job on especially because you're on the spot. It didn't get to the key point. My point is, if we trigger the compulsory purchase order now, or let's say very, very soon to now, the clock starts ticking and we can start moving forward positively. The fact that it takes a lot of time to do and it's complicated, I sort of understand, but that's not a reason not to do it. As far as I understand it, district councils get involved in quite a lot of complicated things that take quite a long time to do. So that's not a reason not to do that. I think the key thing for me is if the valuation switches, do we have an off-ramp? So if it's 20 grand, we think the valuation is going to be 20 grand, we're moving forward with the compulsory purchase. If that valuation for any reason flipped to 1.7 million, I can understand why this council would not want to fund that or would struggle to fund it. But when it's 20 grand and it could be a compulsory purchase order, why wouldn't we keep exploring that?
Yeah, thank you. I think the two things that I want to, firstly, I wasn't trying to say doing something difficult is not a reason. You're absolutely right. I just wanted to give you the sort of the background information. To be honest, the research we've been doing is to look at the process. So actually, we have not specifically looked at the legal point of whether you can start and then pull out. As you say, put on the spot, the one thing that I would say is, I suppose, if we start the process and then the owner of the land wants to legally challenge that and starts incurring legal costs, if we pull out, then quite rightly he will be looking to the council to repay those costs. Not looking at the legislation, I don't know whether or not he would be allowed to ask for that and whether a court could award it, but I would expect him to be saying, well, you've put me to this cost, I want the council to pay it.
Thank you, Lee, that's appreciated. I think from everything I've heard so far, I think we are into a deferral.
Okay. So. Any more questions? We can move into a bit of debate then. Thank you, Gary.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to go with the officer's recommendations, but please, ladies, don't think I'm shutting a door. If you can bear with me for a few moments, please. And there's a person that's not in the room at the moment who's the key to this debate and the answer to this issue. And I like to think that, knowing the individual for a number of years, that I might be able to broker a meeting. And I think that is important. And I'd like to include the ward members, obviously, with 2 representatives or 3 from the Allotments Association. Because at the moment, we don't seem to have any negotiation bargaining point to go on. It's all hypothetical with respect to Tim, but I accept those figures because I've seen other cases, and you've heard from Lee about the PC example. So I do think I cannot agree with your suggestion, Councillor Cruz, to start the proceedings now, because I think it would put the council at grave risk. And I need to give the ladies especially a bit of background on why we can't afford it. And it's not a debate or argument or picking sides, it's a matter of fact, this is. Since 2010, all local authorities have been subject to austerity cuts, to the point where a neighbouring authority has got the auditors in. We're in a much better position than that. But our Chief Finance Officer has a heavy duty of responsibility, and it's up to us members to ensure that that prudent approach is taken, and that's to keep this authority finances viable. We could not afford anything like $1 million, never mind 1.7 million. So I cannot accept going into a risk that might be £20,000 now, but suddenly skews high because of legal costs and damages to the authority. So I think what I'm saying is that we need to find a way forward on this. I'm worried about the deferment because I've tried to get from Tim an indication of, well, how long can we defer it for? Because the clock's ticking. And GNR don't meet till when next time? So I am concerned about those factors in deferring. I think it might be better to agree the officer's recommendations now and us start very quickly moves with me contacting the owner of this land, because let's face it, we've been 3 times at Stockholm's for previous planning applications which have been refused by this same owner. So I know his intent, and that would be, in my humble opinion, that he would want planning application approval, and therefore the value of the land would rise. So I also want to add, please, that I always answer my emails, but I was on annual leave when all these emails came in. So when I came back from annual leave, I forwarded them to committee and to Tim Braun, so to make sure that all your correspondences were noted. And I thank you all for that, and I thank you too for your eloquent speaking tonight. So with a heavy heart, Chair, I think that it's put us in a spot. It's caught us with our pants down in a way, if we may say, because of the financial situation we're in, because of the austerity years, but obviously a need to do something about this. And it's clear that we need to work upon this in the local plan and identify more sites for allotments for obvious reasons. And I think, you know, I'm happy to pick up that cudgel. So I do think that we should go with the opposite recommendations, Chair, but move straight away. And I'm happy to move straight away tomorrow to make contact with the owner and try and broker a meeting. And I think at least that way we might know where we stand. And I also think about the previous item on the agenda where the Stockholm's committee hall people have won that asset of community value. And I just wonder, could you shift your allotments onto that piece of land? I don't know. You may know better than I. And that's for you and the ward members to think and say, not for me, but it's just a thought. So I think there's a lot of things to go through, and I think I'd like to suggest this meeting and me try and broker a meeting with the owner. I've known, say, a lot of years. See what your thoughts are. So I'm going to move the recommendations.
You prepared? Can I find a seconder?
Chair, can I come back first before?
Well, I would like to find a seconder first, if I may. Thank you. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, is it possible to bring forward an amendment?
It's been proposed and second, so amendment can be tabled now.
Okay. I think my amendment is, I think there's good sentiment around the table. I don't think anybody wants to see this asset of community value not be an asset of community value anymore. So I think the sentiment is good. I welcome Councillor Purdy's offer to set up some sort of discussion with the landowner and all the rest of it. Who knows? It seems like a bit of a wild card option, but you know, fair enough. Let's give it a go. I don't think we've got enough information to conclude that we can't go forward with a compulsory purchase order up to a certain value, which would be relatively modest. We could form a consortium. We could look at involving the Matlock Town Council, other public bodies. Could be a modest value. If that modest value is broken, then we could then take ourselves out of the equation. So my amendment is that we need to collect more information. We need clearer legal input from the legal team so that we understand whether we can start the compulsory purchase order process with a view to completing it successfully, look for collaboration with other public bodies like Matlock Town Council, and if the valuation becomes too high that we can't absorb it, then clearly as a district council we could review that decision then, and if it reached that point we could back out and say it's too much money, we can't afford it. So that's my amendment.
Can I bring Lee back into this one again?
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, Councillor Cruz. Amendment has to add to it. In effect, what you've done is spoken against the original motion. So it wouldn't really be an amendment. It would
help
be to
me achieve that objective?
I think what you've actually done there, and through you, Chair, is you're advocating that the original motion is voted down, at which point then you can put forward a motion that we defer it in order to gather further information.
Councillor Hughes, you have a question.
Chair, I'd like to just, point of information really, the landowner has approached me directly as a Matlock Town Councillor and through his agent, and he put forward the exact same proposal that Councillor Purdy seems to be suggesting that we go with now. And that proposal is not appropriate given the use of the land that the residents of Stockholm wish that land to be put to, which Mr. Braund described in his report. So earlier on this year, Matlock Town Council surveyed residents of Stockholm to determine what they wanted the land that Matlock Town Council is acquiring from the district, what use it should be put, and they were quite clear in their opinions about the use, and those opinions that are mentioned by Mr. Braund in his report. So, and allotments did not appear in that at all in the use of that land. They wanted it to remain as an open space. There aren't very many open spaces in Stockholm that can be used. They were the whole committee wanted it to be available for use by people in the hall, and other residents wanted to be used available for use for a variety of public space type activities, including everything from playing games to walking the dog and all sorts of other things. There are other applications that it could be used for as well. For example, a public community orchard and wildflower meadows. Those were the two other clear favourites as far as the residents of Stockholm are concerned. The site is actually half the size of the current allotment site, and therefore it wouldn't be able to hold as many allotments as there are at the moment. Now, the agent was making use of was proposing that the allotments were moved from his site, from the owner's site, to the site that Matlock Town Council is acquiring, because of course that made his decision easier and put the responsibility for removing the allotments onto Matlock Town Council or the district council, and not onto himself. So I would suggest that actually in coming forward with that proposal, all you're doing is suggesting to the town council that it meets, and what the proposal that will be put forward is the one that he put forward to us and his agent asked to meet and discuss earlier on this year. So I feel that moving in that direction was not an appropriate thing to do, and because he has the owner has a particular motive in approaching the town council.
Thanks for that information, Councillor Hughes. Councillor Archer.
Thank you, Chair. I was just in terms of Councillor Purdy's recommendation, my concern with it is that if we vote with the recommendation tonight, with the officer's recommendation, as I read it, that takes a compulsory purchase option out of off the table, and therefore would weaken our position. So if we are going into a meeting with the owner and we've already taken compulsory purchase off the table by voting against it tonight, that would weaken our position. So I would think we would be better to defer for now until the meeting's taken place. And then we can potentially, after the meeting, when we know the score, that might actually help inform our decision of whether compulsory purchase is right or not. Whereas if we vote against a compulsory purchase tonight rather than deferring, then we've got that we've taken that option off the table. So I personally think we're better to defer rather than take compulsory purchase out of the equation tonight before we've had the meeting, before we've got more information.
Thank you, Chair. I really would like to know from the officers where we stand with the deferment, because I'm worried about that clock ticking. And thank you, Councillor Lewis, for what you just said. I'm not happy to hear it, but I will say I will still try and speak to the owner because I've known him for a long time. I'm sure I might not change his mind, but I feel I still need to speak to him. I just need to know, Chair, where we stand with the deferment. Could it be brought back to the next GNR? Have we got time to do that? And if we agree with deferment, I am happy to still meet and try and help as best we can from the council perspective.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just see what the diary's like. Jason's just having a look. Next is 18th of November is the next committee.
So do you and Tim agree that we could defer till that date and we get on with this in the meantime and try and find some more information?
Councillors, it's up to you. If you wish to defer the matter, that's...
Check that, but I don't want us to go and defer and then find we're out of time.
I don't think there'd be any time limit on to apply. You can apply to compulsory purchase a piece of land at any time.
Thank you, Lee. I'm just happy to defer at the moment.
There's also something running through my mind in terms of risk that be useful to have some clarity on during that deferment. If the piece of land does turn out to be suitable for residential use and the cost of it, and we get into compulsory purchase of a piece of land that's very expensive, do we have the option of that piece of land being used for social housing instead of allotments at that point, and a discussion and change of usage? I don't know. That's something that I'm asking whether we can explore, because I don't think the financial risk is as great if it does turn out that, yes, it is residential, but then we've got to make a decision whether we use that land for residential purposes or we use it as very, very expensive allotments. And I'm sure, you know, our good friends here would understand if we ended up going down that road and having to use the land as social housing to actually validate the use of the public purse in purchasing it or selling it onto a housing association if that was the outcome. My other question, and I know we're beyond questions, but is there a possibility that as tenants, the allotment association users can put in planning applications to find out if they would be allowed to build a residential dwelling on their allotment? Would that give us an idea about whether the land, in terms of, you know, drainage and all that sort of stuff, would be suitable for residential? And it's just another way of looking at the planning permission and the value of the land. So they're just thoughts that are running through my head, and I would like some clarity from legal and from finance around the actual risk involved in purchasing this piece of land, because if it is a valuable piece of land and we end up with it, we can always sell it on if we can't use it for the purpose we intend to use it for.
Councillor Rowe, I'd like to bring Lee in at this stage.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I was actually going to come in and ask to come in to make sure that we got the procedure right, but if I can do that first, and then I just want to make a comment, if you're okay, Chair, on what Councillor Rowe. So, Councillor Purdy and Hobson, the original motion that you moved and seconded was to vote with recommendations. I take it now that you've moved that you're withdrawing your original motion, which has the approval of Councillor Hobson, and you're putting forward a new motion, and then that's it. Thank you. Just making sure we follow the procedure. Councillor Raw, that was quite a lot of information, which I don't think I can answer. But the only thing that was coming to mind there is we have to have a statutory power to do a CPO. At the moment, we're talking about using a statutory power under the Allotments Act. Therefore, if we then bought it under the Allotments Act, we would have to use it for the Allotments Act because that's the statutory power we could. You can't just buy land under a CPO on the basis that it potentially could be valuable and then you could sell it on. You actually have to have a reason for it. Thank you, Chair.
Oh, okay, thank you. So we're now going to vote on the deferral. Thank you. All those in favour? Deferral, that's it. Deferral, I beg your pardon. It's my writing. Hey? Yeah, it's GNR meeting, yeah.
Thank you, Chair. This report is to request the adoption of the updated Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Policy. The last time it was reviewed was March 2016, so we felt it was good practice to review it, check through the legislation, identify there's been a couple of very small changes that I've put into the new policy, and we also wanted to update some of the vocabulary. We've changed the structure slightly in the new policy. The aim is that it makes it very much more readable and user-friendly. The policy covers employees, the council, the public, and the people that work for us. So, for example, Serco. It's to cover everybody. It's really a policy for all. We were very keen as well that we wanted to retain the Derbyshire Dales flavour that was in the original policy. So you'll note the introduction makes reference to respect and dignity for all leaflets. And there is also a set of case studies at the back of the policy that exemplify very well how we meet the requirements of the equality and diversity legislation in our own policy. The report and the policy have been to JCG and to the employee group and has been circulated to members twice over the last few weeks. Some of the comments that came from employees and the initial processes have already been absorbed into this policy. Since we've had circulated it to members, we've had some comments which I have responded to and then not had a reply from that councillor, so I assume that that councillor is satisfied. But we have had an issue that's raised by Councillor Hughes as well around the language that's being used around the definition of paragraph 4.8 in the policy on sex and gender. The definitions that we've used for sex are based on those that the government uses and also those that are recognised by the World Health Organization. However, they include the phrase that sex refers to biological aspects of an individual as determined by their anatomy and assigned at birth. Councillor Hughes has questioned around using that assignation at birth as a definition because we do have new legislation in place in the UK. And people can now apply for a gender recognition certificate if they've changed their gender. And upon getting that certificate, they can apply for a new birth certificate with their new gender as detailed on it. So we're wondering whether it's possible to take the assigned at birth out of this definition within the policy. Any questions?
Any questions? Yes, Hughes.
Can I move this? I'd like to move acceptance of the report and the or we noting it or accepting it? We're accepting it, aren't we? And with the change that Ms. Wilson suggests.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hobson, would you like to second that?
I'm absolutely happy to second it, and I was really interested in to see the Derbyshire Dales sort of the case studies at the back. And I would urge people and people at home, if they've not seen it, please look through it. It's a credit to you. Thank you.
Yeah, both Sue and I was at that meeting last week, and it was really very, very interesting. It was quite a bit of good legislation.
Thank you.
Comment, if I may, and I don't mean it to sound flippant, but I'm reminded that when Mahatma Gandhi visited this country, he was asked what he thought of Western civilization. And he replied something along the lines of, it would be a good thing, or it's a good thing. And equality, too, is an absolutely excellent and laudable objective. But my word, it's a difficult process to follow, not easy, and things change invariably. You know, we're now having these debates about transgender, you know, and I remember some years ago being at meetings here where this council was challenged by, again, someone who had changed gender and wanted to use the toilets here, but he felt he was being stigmatized, as it were, for reasons. So one of the things I have raised in the past, incidentally, is about the level of disabled and ethnic employees within the district, and it's very low. And despite whatever recruitment we've tried, it's very, very difficult. Again, my mind goes back, educationally speaking, to a time when low ability children coming into schooling were giving what was called positive discrimination. And I sometimes think that it would be no bad thing if we could use something along those lines to raise the numbers. I'm aware too in the report, Liz, about the gender pay gap, and I was actually going to ask you the question there, you know, what our levels are. I mean, are we on an equal footing in that respect?
My understanding is that they're extremely close. From the figures that we published last year in the Equality Report, there's very little disparity between the genders. So we do quite well here at the authority.
Yeah, so that's really excellent to know, of course. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean,
Thank you for that, Mike. Councillor Rowe can be very brief.
Just a brief comment following on from what Mike said, really, and it's just something that I probably mentioned before, just about the makeup of this council, and that, you know, we have not got many disabled councillors, we've got a limited number of women, and how we as a group can encourage people to become more representative of the communities that we serve, really, and how we do that going forward. I know we had a brief meeting, Sue, didn't we, about you know, encouraging women within the council, but you know, there are people, I'm sure, that are councillors and do have some disabilities, but I think we haven't got a fully diverse and representative group of people sat on this council, so I think it's perhaps something we could look at within our council plan.
That comment, Chris, Councillor.
I agree to a point, Councillor Rowe. I think we've got to look at the population of Derbyshire Dales, and I think, if I may say, we sort of mirror that, you know. But I think it's not the fault of this council. It's through the selection processes of the different parties, and that's where the messages need to go back. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, so I'm going to move to the vote now. It's been proposed and seconded. House recommendation, all in favour? Unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. I'm moving on to number 15, digital transformation, phase 2, priorities and ongoing approach to change and innovation.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of the report sets out really a statement on the position over the last 2 years of the digital transformation project, the work that's been done, the achievements that we've made through that process, chiefly around the implementation of the CRM and the transition that we've seen in terms of customer interaction onto a self-service platform. It's been a successful project to date, with a number of systems launched and processes reviewed and streamlined and made more efficient, as well as offering a significant increase in the range of services available to residents online directly, as well as speeding up the processes involved. The system itself has been crucial through the last 18 months, a little bit more with COVID. It's provided a gateway for customers residents to continue to interact with the council during that period, as well as to allow staff to work from home and continue to be productive during that time, and has crucially underpinned a number of the key priorities during that period for the district council in terms of garden waste service and the business grants and test and trace support payments for residents through the COVID support measures. There have been a number of other projects that the digital transformation team have either led on or supported during that time. I won't go through them all as detailed in the report. The key objective of the report is to obviously note the work that's been done so far, but also to set out the priorities for the final 12 months as it stands of the current digital transformation project. A number of these priorities were identified either through discussions with directors and directorates throughout the previous 2 years, or have been identified as part of a work around other projects so far. The agreed priority list as it stands in the report was discussed and confirmed by CLT at a recent meeting, and it's the recommendation is to approve that priority for that next 12 months on the conditions obviously set out that any additional expenditure that is required comes back with a full business case to support anything of that nature, and that a further report will be brought to the next GNR committee or a later GNR committee in regards to any future direction for transformation within the council.
Members' questions? Alison.
Thank you, Chair. Forgive me if I'm going to answer something that you gave in your report, but I couldn't hear most of it over here. So my first question is, I don't see any reference in your transformation programme to the implementation of Microsoft 365. I just wonder, is that not going ahead now? As an organisation, are you not implementing that? The second thing that jumped out to me was the systems administration review. It seems that you're saying you're carrying a risk that you potentially have changes made in different systems that can impact on others. What is your change control policy? What are the procedures that you go through to actually sign off changes to your systems among your system owners? Thank you.
Thank you. In relation to the first question, sorry, can you hear me? Sorry, is that any better? Can you hear me, Tona? Okay. In relation to the 365 question, that's actually something that's being led by the regional IT service, and it doesn't fall into the remit of the digital transformation team's work. As far as I understand on that front, it is still an ongoing progress, but we're at least 12 months away before it's deployed into this district council. In relation to your second question around the systems admin review, part of that work is to look at proper change control processes. We essentially have a rather historic and fragmented approach to systems administration. To be fair, it's not unique to this council. In a number of public services that I've worked in, it's the same approach, where systems over time have developed within individual departments and have usually utilised skills within that team by virtue of people who've been slightly more capable with systems within that area. And as a result, we have a hybrid solution where some systems administration elements are handled by the regional IT service that we're signed up to. Other elements are handled by the BSU technical team, and some other key systems are handled within each individual department. And that's part of why we need to look at addressing that situation and building a more stable foundation for the future.
Okay, can I just come back on that? The implementation of Microsoft 365, is the impact of that not being considered alongside the other system developments? So although it's 12 months away, I think there should be some assessment of that. As far as change control management, there are various industry standards that you go through on that, and I've not worked in an ID department that doesn't have a formal process around that, so I'm not quite sure why this council hasn't adopted one yet. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Office 365, as I say, is actually something that's being driven and completely owned by our regional IT service, which the digital transformation is not part of. That's only part of Derbyshire Dales District Council. So it's not something that we have an involvement directly into. But yes, it is something that is considered in general terms if we were to look at other solutions for systems. If that's going to provide any overlap, we'd always obviously take that into consideration in any proposal that we put forward. In terms of change control process, you're quite right, there are a lot of different mechanisms to go through. And again, as far as I understand, the IT service here does operate on a change control process mechanism, but we don't have that within the localized systems administration in a robust mechanism. It's not to say that each individual teams may not have processes in place for that, but the problem is it's disjointed at the moment, so it doesn't necessarily look at across an integrated framework.
Councillor Purdy.
Chair, if I may just help Councillor Allison, we are members of the joint ICT group of Bolsover and North East Derbyshire, and Councillor Hughes is a member, as is Karen, and they'll correct me if I'm wrong, but 365 is rolling out, and I think they were rolling it out in North East Derbyshire first. So it will come to us, so it's been evaluated, I think, at present.
Thank you. Thank you. So I'll move on to debate then. Thank you.
Well, I'm happy to move the recommendations, Chair. I'm pleased to see the first phase has gone successful, and I'm sure the older councillors of us will agree. Thank goodness we brought this in. We didn't know the pandemic was coming, but my goodness, hasn't it helped? And look forward to the second phase rolling out. There's a lot of work to do, I can see that. I've also asked Glenn if we could have a briefing for the members at some stage, because to me it's like a giant cog working in the background. It's one of our most important cogs, and without it I think all the other components might fail. So I do think it's important that members see more of that, and I've asked Glenn to do a briefing at some stage in the near future. He said he was going to, but you know, we've had a lot on all round, haven't we? Thank you.
So found a seconder? Councillor Cruz? Yeah.
I think Councillor Purdy's idea about getting a briefing and maybe seeing a few of the systems in action and some of the prototypes that are coming through would be good, just to get a bit of a feel for it, because it's all on a piece of paper here. So getting behind the scenes would be good. Not that we want to come in and micromanage you guys, but probably educate us a little bit more. The other thing is in the reports, which I think is very detailed, you've got resources, cost and duration, but there's nothing really about benefit. So not for now really, but for maybe a future report. And I know it might not always be a pound note benefit, but if it was just, these are the things, excuse me, these are the aspects of the service to customers or to the council that are going to be positively impacted, that would be good to see. So thank you very much.
Thank Moving on to item 16, members, learning and development.
Thank you, Chair. This is last but by no means the least item on the agenda. This is the annual report on the Members' Learning and Development Plan. It reviews the learning and development that took place last year. It sets out the work programme for the working group this year, and it also sets out a programme for the forthcoming year. The working group has had input into this report and the work programme and the training programme, and I'll just flag up that one of the items in the work programme has been completed, and that's the element of a mechanism to obtain feedback from members on learning and development opportunities. So the working group has now agreed a format, a pro forma, and I would just encourage members, when you attend a learning and development event, if you complete the pro forma, because the working group will then use that information to inform future programmes. So I'm open to any questions, Chair.
Yes, we're in debate, Chair. I'll move that recommendation. Like I say, we've been working on this quite a lengthy time now, and it's I'm happy to move it.
Councillor Allison, would you like to second that?
Yeah, I'll second it. I've just got a comment to make about it though while I second it. There are various items of mandatory training listed in here, but it's disappointing to see from the report that even members of the committees where the mandatory training is required don't actually do the training. And I think that maybe we need to reword that because it doesn't appear to be mandatory as far as I'm concerned. There seems to be no consequences for not doing it, so I don't know why we're calling it mandatory. Thank you.
Have you seconded that?
That's what I said at the start.
Okay, I'm just ready to vote now. Very briefly, please.
Yeah, just coming back on Jackie's point. I appreciate when it says mandatory. I think one of the things that we don't manage to pick up on within the training stuff is pre-learning. So, for example, I also work for a council, so I also have a mandatory duty to do equalities training, etc. And I might not have attended the training here because it's a duplication of time and stuff. So I think if we could perhaps look at how we can accredit other training that colleagues and councillors do, so sometimes they don't have to repeat the same training twice, if that makes sense.
Thank you. Councillor, last question from Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Chair. Just a point of information, really, and that is that in fact, the report notes that all members of the Planning Committee and Licensing and Appeals Committee have had the training now. So the report is updated in a note below. So I think it is mandatory.
One more for Councillor Perry, and then I'm going to the vote.
Thank you, Chair. Well, it is 100% of Councillor Hughes says, and I want to bring that in. And also, it's in the welcome pack for all members. It says mandatory. Mandatory is mandatory.
Okay. Okay.